Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why we sometimes copy the way people talk without even realizing it? Or how we pick up new communication habits just by watching others? Today we're diving into a fascinating study that explores the hidden ways we learn to communicate, especially how we learn to understand and connect with others. This research is all about something called linguistic alignment. Think about it. When you chat with someone, you often start using some of the same words, phrases, or even the speed of their speech without even trying. This study asks a big question. If you see someone else interacting with a child, and that person is really good at adjusting their language to be understood by the child, does watching that make you better at talking to children too? And if so, how does that happen? They propose it is through a learning process that works a bit like learning from your own mistakes, but by watching someone else. Before we get into the experiment, let's quickly touch on why this is important. For a long time, scientists thought that we mostly learn to align our language with someone else while we are talking to them. This happens through something like automatic priming, basically. Hearing certain words or phrases just makes us more likely to use them ourselves. Another idea is that we're really trying to be understood, so we change how we speak based on who we're talking to. But this new research asks if we can learn these communication skills just by watching others. Imagine watching a really good teacher interact with kids. Does that observation alone make you a better communicator with kids, even before you talk to them yourself? So here is how they tested this idea. They had people participate in a three-part experiment. First, everyone played a picture naming game with a child. This was like their normal way of talking to a child, their baseline. Then the interesting part, they watched recordings of an adult playing the same game with the child. This adult demonstrator was either really good at matching the child's way of talking high alignment or not so good low alignment. While watching, the participants had to guess what the adult demonstrator would say next. Finally, after watching, they played the game with a new child. This part was to see if what they learned from watching actually made them better communicators. To make things specific, they focused on how people refer to pictures of people. For example, they could call a doctor, occupation-based, or the person in the white coat, appearance-based. The children in the study tended to use one style more than the other. The researchers then manipulated whether the adult they watched was also using that style to match the child, high alignment, or not, low alignment. First, a quick check to see if their manipulation worked. They asked participants after the experiment if they thought the demonstrator was highly aligned or not. And guess what? Most people correctly identified whether they watched a high alignment or low alignment demonstrator. This means the difference was clear and noticeable. This next part is really interesting. Before and after watching the demonstrator, participants rated how much they thought the demonstrator understood the child's perspective. The ratings were similar before they watched anything. But after watching the high alignment demonstrator, people rated them as much better at taking the child's perspective. Watching the low alignment demonstrator made people rate them as less perspective taking. So, how someone communicates, the alignment they show, actually influences how we judge their skills as a communicator. This is cool because it shows alignment isn't just about words, it's a social signal. Now, for the main behavioral findings, when participants watched a demonstrator who was highly aligned with the child, their own alignment with the child increased in the later stages of the experiment. But, and this is key, if they watched a demonstrator who was not aligned with the child, their own alignment decreased. This means observing someone else's communication style directly changed how they communicated. And here is the even more powerful part. Remember how they played with the new child in the end? Well, the changes in alignment that participants showed after watching the demonstrator stayed even when they talked to this new child. This is super important because it shows they didn't just learn to adapt to a specific child. They learned a strategy for communicating with children in general. It was a transferable skill, not just a reaction to one person. So how did this learning exactly happen? This is where the advanced computational modeling comes in. They used the type of model inspired by how we learn from rewards and punishments, but applied it to observing others. They looked at the prediction errors. When someone watches another person, they form expectations about what that person will do. If the other person does something different, that's a prediction error. The researchers found that it wasn't just about copying the demonstrator's last move, nor was it simply about hearing certain words more often. Instead, it was the discrepancy between what the observer expected the demonstrator to do and what the demonstrator actually did that drove the learning. They compared a few models. One was based on simply copying the last action imitation. Another was based on how often certain words were heard, priming. The best model, however, was one based on these observational prediction errors. This model explained the data much better. It suggested that people update their communication strategy based on how surprising the demonstrator's actions were relative to their predictions. And here's a cool detail from the modeling in the group that watched high alignment, both when the demonstrator surprised them by aligning more than expected positive prediction error and when they surprised them by aligning less than expected negative prediction error. It led to changes in the observer's own alignment. In the group that watched low alignment, it was mainly when the demonstrator aligned less than expected that led to decreased alignment. This asymmetry makes sense because the low alignment group's behavior was often surprising compared to what participants might have predicted. It shows that learning is driven by unexpected events. So, what does all of this mean for us? This study fundamentally changes how we think about linguistic alignment. It's not just something that happens between two people talking. It can be learned just by watching. This means that communicative strategies, like how to adjust your language for different listeners, can spread through a community by observation. Think about how new parents learn to talk to babies, or how teachers learn to communicate with students. They watch others, and by observing, they pick up these skills. This research also speaks to the complexity of conversations with more than two people. In these situations, we might be listening in, not directly participating. These overhearers can still learn important communication strategies, even without common ground with the speakers. It's like learning the rules of a game by watching others play, even if you're not on the field yourself. The biggest takeaway is that we are active learners who constantly update our understanding of how to communicate. We don't just react, we predict, we err, and we learn from those errors, even when we're just observing. This goes beyond simple imitation or just picking up words. It's about learning a flexible strategy for social interaction. What are the limitations? Well, they use specific types of alignment and a specific age group adults talking to kids. It would be interesting to see if this applies to different languages, different kinds of linguistic adjustments like sentence structure, or other social situations like talking to someone who doesn't speak your language well. Also, they suggest the alignment levels they use might not have been extreme enough to show a perfectly balanced effect of positive and negative prediction errors. Future studies could push those boundaries. But the core finding is powerful. Linguistic alignment is a socially transmissible skill, learned through prediction, error-driven observation. It's a way to spread communicative norms and perhaps a deeper understanding of how to connect with others. It highlights that we're not just sponges absorbing language passively, but active strategists learning and adapting through complex social and cognitive processes. So, what do you think? Have you ever caught yourself talking like someone you've been around a lot? Or learned a new way to explain things just by watching someone else? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the science of communication, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more fascinating research, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. Thanks for watching.